back on in the right frame of mind. The king said, bring him to me. So this is after Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam interpreted the king's dream. The king said, bring him to me. And when the messenger came to Prophet Yusuf prison, he said, Prophet Yusuf replied, go back to your master and ask him about the intentions of the women who had cut their hands. My Lord is well aware of their schemes. He said, the king now said, what is the matter with you, O women, when you tried to seduce Joseph? They said, Allah forbid, God forbid, yani. We did not know of any evil that he had committed. The governor's wife then said, now the truth is out. It was I who tried to seduce him, and he is in fact telling the truth. This is so that he may know that I did not betray him in private or in secret, and that Allah does not guide the schemes of the betrayers. Yet I do not claim to be entirely free of any type of mistake. The soul commands evil, except those on whom my Lord has mercy. Truly my Lord is forgiving and merciful. The king said, bring him to me, and I will reserve him for myself. And when he spoke with him, he said, from this day on, you are with us established and secure. Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam replied, put me in charge of the storehouses of the land. You will find me honest and knowledgeable. And thus we established Yusuf in the land to live therein wherever he wished. We touch with our mercy whomever we will, and we never waste the reward of the righteous. But the reward of the hereafter is better for those who believe and observe piety. All right. So, you guys remember where we left off last week? It's fresh in your memory. Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam told them the interpretation of the dream. The man came to him, who used to be his ex-cellmate 6-7 years prior. He came to him and said, hey, we need the interpretation of the dream. So he got it. And then when the king heard it, he was so impressed, he said, bring me this person. Right? The person who interpreted this dream so well, and he gave us instructions about how to save Egypt. He was so impressed by this skill. Remember, nobody before him, when the king asked his mala, his cabinet, they replied, Al-Ghathu Ahlam. Like, oh, this is just a dream. You ate too much pizza, don't worry. It means nothing. So when someone was able to not only accurately describe it, but he gave them instructions on how to save Egypt afterwards, the king was so impressed, like, wait, this is a prisoner? Bring me this man. I want to see who this is. And then what happened when the man went back to Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam and said, the king is inviting you officially to come back? What did Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam say? Yeah, he said, wait. He said, no thanks. He's a prisoner, wrongfully imprisoned, young man, wasting his life away, or his life is being wasted away. And so, the phrasing, astaghfirullah, I can't say he's wasting his life away. His life is being wasted away, at least in our, how we would see it. And he gets an invitation by the king. Like, you got to really, really just envision this for just 1 second. Really, this is a real story that actually happened. This is not a fable. This is not a metaphor. This is not a fairy tale. This really happened to a real human being who was created flesh and blood like me and you. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, if I were in his shoes and I were offered clemency from the king, I would have accepted it without inquiring further. And this is our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. I'm paraphrasing the hadith. He said, because it's very tough. Imagine spending several years in prison, really expecting I have no hope. And the king of all places, this is clearly from Allah. The king, I mean, in our era, the president of the whole country is asking for you specifically, inviting you out. And then Prophet Yusuf ﷺ said, no, wait. I'm not going to accept the invite out of prison. I'm not accepting the clemency or to come meet with the king officially. He said, Ma balun niswa. Go ask the women. Remember that whole story why I landed in prison before to begin with? 6-7 years ago? One of your governors and all this whole situation, they accused me of wrongdoing, then they threw me in prison unjustly. Go back to those people and ask those women what happened with that whole situation. Now, and we recited the remaining of the ayat just now, so we'll continue. That's exactly where we left that story. And we talked at length, the entirety of last week was talking about the mindset and the integrity of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam in this moment. Do you remember? And I had you talk amongst yourselves, what would you have done? Like, if we're really honest with ourselves, what would we have done? Even when they asked us previously for the interpretation of the dream, what would you have done? Many of us said, well, honestly, I wouldn't have given them that. I would have used it as a bargaining chip. Well, if you want the interpretation, free me first. Then we'll see, right? We went through that whole exercise. Now, this after that, he gave the interpretation asking for nothing in response. And we said that this, subhanAllah, was the most strategic, the most wise, the most sincere, all the above. And then now he Comes back the second time, says, okay, come, the king wants to meet you. He says, no, in that case, no. I'm not leaving here until you tell him to go call those women and figure it out. Now, keep in mind, the story, when we're reading the story, it happens in the next verse, the next ayah. So it feels like 5 minutes later. In reality, is it 5 minutes later? He's still going to go summon those women and wherever they are, and they're going to appear, get a court date in the king's court, and the king officially, demands, summons them that they come and so on. That's going to take whatever, a couple of days, weeks maybe, right? It's not like today you have internet, you call them on the spot. Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam is like saying, I'll wait a couple of more weeks in prison until this gets settled. I'm not getting out like this. Now, let's be honest. How many of us have that integrity? Now, he's not only thinking as a righteous person and as a wise prophet. He was not a prophet yet, officially, right? As a young man. But he's obviously, receiving divine wisdom. However, he's not only thinking as a righteous man, he's also strategic. He's also smart and wise. He was taking the correct steps every time. He's a wise man, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, making wise chess moves. That was the best chess move at the time. When the king needs help, you don't tell him, I'm going to hold that as a bargaining chip. Well, what are you going to do for me? The king will say, I'll show you what I'll do for you. I'll chop your head. The way that you get in the good graces of the king, you don't just, play games with him. You offer him the service. And he sees your expertise and he gets impressed. And he sees clearly you're not like everyone else in his life. When you're in that position of leadership, every single person in your life is trying to get something from you. All day, every day. They get sick and tired of it. To the point where if somebody's offering something and asking for zero, the king is intrigued. And we said, you can apply this, or employ it in your life. Figure out how. I'm not going to, I can't give instructions for every aspect of life, but the Quran gives you hints how to be a wise person. And we said, like, maybe sometimes you're involved with somebody who's a leader, who's in a high position, and everybody is always asking them for something, or it's always quid pro quo. I'll help you, but I want something in return. If you show up with expertise and value and you literally ask for nothing, you are suddenly the most interesting person in the room to them. I want you to understand this part. And they just have to ask you. They have to figure out what you're about. And they will come chase after you, right? It's very fascinating, but that's very often how it works in life. The higher in a post, a position, a person is, the more that they're so used to everyone asking, then you have to do what do they call it? The pattern interruption by being the only person who doesn't ask, who just offers them help, and they get weirded out by that. Anyhow, so Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, the king said, okay, bring him to me. Have this person come out of prison. So he's offering him a favor, but he's also saying, I'm interested in this, meeting this person. And the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam rejects it or declines it. He says, no, not until you go figure this out. So the king was just, very impressed by this very bold move. Again, I want you to really picture the story as it really happened. What is happening in your mind? The president tells a prisoner in some random place, here, you have the official invite of the president you're going to be escorted out, not in handcuffs, but, officially invited by the king. And he say, nope, no thank you. Go figure this out first. So it was a very bold move, and it worked. The king sent for them. He sent for the women. He sent for the wife of the minister and the women that were at that party where they cut their hands. And, however long it took weeks, it took days. And then they showed up in his court. And he primarily had Imra'atul Aziz, the minister's wife, or the governor, in the translation said governor, minister, the one who, Yusuf alayhi salam was a slave in their household. He brought her in questioning, but the other women were present. They're going to testify next. So he asked them, what happened? What's the story with this man who was thrown in prison 7-8 years ago? All this whole story. So keep in mind that the king was not involved. This guy, the king now, and by the way, the phrase used in the Quran is king, Malik. When this story is told in the Bible, the phrase used here, or the name used for him, is Pharaoh. So Pharaoh is just a title. It's a title for the king of Egypt. So in some eras, Pharaoh was used. Other eras, king was used. And then eventually in the, whatever it was, ancient Egyptian language, eventually they developed the word Pharaoh, and that became the title afterwards. Now, the interesting part, I forgot which sheikh I read this from, but it was not based on his work. Actually, no, sorry, it was here. It's here. It's in this book. He's quoting a Bible studies scholar, not Muslim, who said that there was an interesting thing in the Bible. The word Pharaoh is used for all of them, for this one as well as the Pharaoh of Moses alayhi salam, of Musa alayhi salam, right? But in the Quran, in this story, king is used. But in the story of, and never the word Pharaoh is used for him. Whereas in the story of Musa alayhi salam in the Quran, only the word Pharaoh is used, Fir'aun, and never the word king is used for him. even though they're both just titles. And that scholar said that in his studies of ancient Egyptian language, he found that to be accurate. That at the time of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, they used the word king in the Egyptian language, and then at the time of Prophet Moses alayhi salam, when he was dealing with his pharaoh, they had moved on to the term pharaoh. And therefore, the Quran is much more accurate. It doesn't use it interchangeably, even though they both represent the king of Egypt, or the highest position in Egypt, which is very fascinating to me, that accuracy that you do not find in the Bible. Anyhow, so in this case, the king was not involved in the punishment of Yusuf alayhi salam earlier. It was the governor, right? The Aziz. That's why the word is used Aziz. Here it's used Malik. So, it's like, imagine a governor of a state here in America. They put somebody in prison wrongfully, and he's been in prison 5, 6, 7 years. Then the president hears about it and then decides to investigate himself. The governor of some state put somebody in prison. A couple of years later, the president starts to investigate this governor's action. How do you think the governor's feeling? Scared, happy? What do you think? He's shaking in his boots. Now the king is now investigating this crime that we committed, this wrongdoing. I thought it was over. It's been years, 6 or 7 years, that Yusuf alayhi salam was in prison unjustly. So imagine those women, and imagine the wife of the minister, the one who started the plot to begin with. Imagine her. She thought she got away with this crime. 6 years have passed, 7 years have passed. It's been so long. Everyone forgot. The rumors were alive for the first couple of months, and then they died out, and it's over. And all of a sudden, she gets, some royal guards show up to her home, and they're like, hey, the king demands you come and appear in court. Why? What's it for? He says, because of this man named Yusuf, who was in prison because of this claim that you made 7 years ago. So what is she thinking in that moment, right in that moment? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? It's obviously a bad thing, right? I'm caught. It's all going to come undone right now. She's not thinking like, they want further testimony. Immediately, as a human being, you're like, oh my God, I'm caught. And then Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam said, ask the women too, who were at that party, because that was the day that he got arrested and put away. So he said, bring everyone there. So they brought the women, summoned them to court. They got a summons as well. So and that was wisdom from Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, because if they just brought the minister's wife, she could just lie again, right? Who's gonna say otherwise? They brought all the women at the party. So now she can't lie, because they're not gonna stand by her. Remember the whole thing? They had the jealousy and the rivalry between them. They're gonna sing the right as soon as they get into that court case. They have no reason to defend her. On what grounds, right? So he brought all of them, and they were all summoned to court. And then the king started to ask them, and they did their investigation. What happened on that day that this young man was arrested? And they said, "Hasha lillahi ma alamna alayhi min su." They said, "God forbid." Hasha lillah. It's another phrasing of Subhanallah. We have not known any evil from this young man. Ma alimna alayhi min su. He had a reputation of complete honor and dignity. And then the governor's wife, قالت الآن حصحص الحق. The governor's wife said, finally the truth has come out. It was I who tried to seduce him, and he is telling the truth. Finally, after many years, Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam is fully exonerated, and the truth is finally known in the highest court of the land. This word is going to spread, just like the rumors spread earlier, and he was never happy to have his name tarnished. But he said, if I were قال رب السجن أحب إلي مما يدعونني إليه. He said, oh my Lord, it's getting out of hand, and she keeps insisting, even though I rejected her before, and it almost made a big problem, but Allah saved her, and she still came again. So he said, oh Allah, I'd rather be in prison. And it was a very, very tough call on his behalf. Like to go to prison and to have your name tarnished, and you have no idea when you're going to get out. How many of us could make that sacrifice? But his integrity was too important to him. So he chose that, and he knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would exonerate him sooner or later. And that's exactly what happened. He was exonerated in the highest court of the land. And then the next ayah, he said, Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam now, so Allah, in this, the storytelling of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially you notice it in this surah, Allah will almost fast forward to the next segment of the story. This happened several times in this surah. So the next ayah is Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam speaking, saying, this is so that he may know that I did not betray him in secret, and that Allah does not guide the scheming of the betrayers. Before I get there, actually, I wanted to make a point about a previous ayah. فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُ الرَّسُولُ قَالَ ارْجَعْ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ فَاسْأَلْهُ مَا بَالُ النِّسْوَةِ. So he said, when the guy came to him and said, the king now is requesting your presence, he said, ارْجَعْ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ. He told the guy who pours wine, right? The guy who's the messenger. He told him, go return to your Rabb, your Lord. and ask him what the women did, that situation from 6 years ago. And then the end of the ayah, the same ayah, he says, Inna Rabbi bi kaydihinna alim. Go ask your Lord, and my Lord is well aware. Isn't that the very beautiful phrasing? Rabbik and Rabbi. He said, go ask your Lord, because that was a phrase they used. My Lord, my master, whatever. They used that for the king, right? And it's not haram to use that phrase. However, we as Muslims, that phrase, we prioritize it primarily for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he said, go ask your Lord. So your Lord still has to investigate to find out, to know. He does not know al-ghaib. He doesn't know the unseen. He doesn't know the reality of what happened. He said, Inna Rabbi bi kaydihinna alim. As for my Lord, he is well aware of that scheme. So he's always, Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam is always doing da'wah. Always. And I'll admit, I will fully admit, when some brothers, mashallah, may Allah bless them and strengthen their iman and accept from them, whenever they're talking with anybody, whether it's business, whether it's some conversation, whether it's anything, they're talking to a Muslim and non-Muslim, doesn't matter. They will always insert da'wah. They will always insert Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I fully admit, may Allah forgive me for this weakness, weakness in myself. I've always, growing up, found that weird. Like he's trying too hard. Or he's like, khalas, we get it, you're religious or whatnot, especially if you're talking to non-Muslims, it might sound weird. Now, I repent from that mindset. May Allah forgive me for this weakness on my behalf. And I hope that I become better and I actually follow in their footsteps. That is the ihsan of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. Non-stop through this surah, as he's talking to non-Muslims who do not know God, as it says, Egypt did not know God at that time. He constantly said that. He didn't have to say, Inna Rabbi bi kaydihinna alim. Go ask your Lord what happened, and guess what? My Lord already knows. Just in case, before you go, my Lord knows exactly what happened. He didn't have to say that. What did it add in terms of, it could harm his situation, right? He's like, wait, go ask your Lord and not my Lord. What, you're saying that guy's not your Lord, the king is not your Lord? You're going to get in trouble for saying that. But he's like, he didn't care. He was just full of integrity and honor and said like, this is how I feel and this is how I think and that's it. There's nothing you can do about it. And he had such an aura of confidence that the king was utterly intrigued. And I repeat this, when you deal with somebody who has everything or somebody who's really powerful, who's used to everybody asking them and always wanting something from them, they are immediately intrigued by the person who doesn't want anything. They feel actually threatened in some way, but they also feel like, who's this guy? Who's this person? Why are they carrying themselves in that way? Why are they so confident? Why don't they want anything from me like everybody else? Everyone's always groveling before me. This person is barely giving me attention. They are, it's very, very intriguing. And then they start coming towards you. They start the law of attraction, right? Or opposites. So I don't know what the science is about it is, but they immediately are just very intrigued. And this is displayed in this surah more than you can ever imagine. So he said to him, he's always interjecting da'wah. There are people in our era, honestly, that have very much employed this, and it is our Dagestani brothers, the wrestlers, the UFC fighters, right? May Allah Ta'ala bless them and reward them. These guys in our era, I believe, in this past decade or so, have been the number one embodiment. You can disagree with me. Obviously, there's better than them. There's the Mujahideen fi sabilillah, 1,000 million times percent better than them. Those who are defending the Muslim lands and fighting for honor and dignity and the right to worship Allah. They are 1,000,000 billion times better than people who fight in the ring for show. However, the people who have had billions literally of eyes on them and had every opportunity to sell out, or even just not sell out, don't sell out your deen, but tone it down a little bit. They had every opportunity to tone it down and just don't broadcast it so much because it's not popular. Now it's popular. Now everybody puts on that Chechen hat and says, alhamdulillah, not me, God, right? Everyone does that now because it's popular. Who made it popular? By Allah's permission alone. These people, right? These Dagestani brothers, Khabib, of course, the leader of them, may Allah bless them and preserve them. And they have started a new era that came out of completely left field. Now, I'm not a UFC watcher. Some of you guys are. You're very avid fans. But it came on my radar. It came on everybody's radar. And these guys were like, they would say in the middle of the conversation, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, this is from God only. At a time when it wasn't popular to do that. At a time when it was definitely going to cost you contracts. You're not a show, you're not a showman. You're not like Connor and these guys who you have to be flashy and silly and stupid. And they would say like, oh, we don't want to be promoted with alcohol. They would tell those showgirls that show up, no, I don't want you to be with me in the promotions and whatnot. That's going to cost them. And it has costed them sometimes. But they were like, I'm going to bring Allah into it as often as I can. Because that's how I believe. That's what I believe. I'm not shy. If I lose the contract, I lose the contract. I lose my position, that's fine. And subhanAllah, Allah chose to reward them for it. And best, guess what? you better believe there are, for every person that ended up, because the era has changed and the times have changed, and now it's cool to have a full beard. Now you can, you wear a kafiyya, or you wear one of those, it's popular and so on. I'm not saying it's wrong to do it now that it's popular. I'm saying that the era of doing it at high risk and getting high reward is not gone, but it's, the era has changed. Do you guys agree? There was a time where if you grew a beard, for the sake of the sunnah, you can't get jobs. They will literally, I'm not talking about just in Western countries, in Muslim majority countries. This lasted for decades. I can speak on Egypt and many of Muslim majority countries. If you grow a beard as a man in a Muslim majority country that's been Muslim for 1400 years straight, you cannot get a corporate job. You can't get a job that has any type of growth or so on. And that's besides the government coming after you and putting you on a list and all that stuff. But just the idea of like, man, should I sacrifice this for the sake of a job and for the sake of this and that? And it was by law. Well, not official. Well, sometimes it was official, frankly speaking. Anyway, my point is, there will always be, in every single era, in every single region, in every single culture, there will always be ways for you to stand up for your deen and stand up for the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that will go against the grain. That will be your test and your opportunity for millions and billions of hasanat. The things that are easy, the things that your culture accepts, that's an opportunity for hasanat all day, every day. But it's not the biggest test. It's not the one that you're being challenged by. It's not the one that Allah is testing you. Are you going to revive this or not? Because heroes are needed to revive that, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, every 100 years, Allah sends mujaddidun, heroes and people who are to renew and to bring the faith back and to stand up for it at whatever cost. And you either stand up for it and you take those hits and you bring it back, or you don't. And you've missed the challenge, and somebody else will take it, and somebody else will be that hero and will have that crown to wear on the Day of Judgment. So you get what I'm saying? Just because something's easy and accepted doesn't mean stop doing it. Beards are accepted and you don't lose a job for it now. Doesn't mean you say, oh, I won't get a beard anymore. No, do it. It's still the sunnah. And you'll still get hasanat depending on your intention. But it's not to say, you'll never understand the struggle of the people one generation ago. Your struggle might be different. And for certain, there are struggles that we have here as US American Muslims that our parents didn't have in their countries one generation ago. There are struggles you have that they don't even recognize whatsoever. That's your struggle. That's your uphill battle. And that's your hasanat, your treasure trove of hasanat. So figure out what it is, and may Allah Ta'ala forgive me for ever judging or thinking less of the people who have been much braver and much more courageous than myself, and following the sunnah of ihsan of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, where they would include Allah in all their conversations regardless of who they're speaking about. Regardless of who they're speaking to, rather, and regardless of what platform they're speaking on. And I pray that Allah gives me the courage to follow in their footsteps and to right my wrongs, and the rest of us as well, inshallah. We still have life, we still have time, we still have opportunity, and Allah has paved the road for us through others. So maybe you can be a pioneer in other things, or maybe you can use this as a launching pad for you. Who knows? Who knows what effect you'll have on the people? Who knows which person in this room now is going to be a hero in this regard or that regard? You never know. Khabib and these guys came out of absolute left field as far as I'm concerned. Dagestan and so on. We know they've been Muslim for generations, but who would have known? Some of you guys who've been following for years would have known. Who would have known many other people who came out of left field and became heroes of Islam? May Allah Ta'ala make us all mujaddidun and heroes of this deen. Okay, so Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam said, go ask your Lord, Rabbuk or Rabbik, and as for my Lord, he already knows. He just pure confidence. And he's always dropping those seeds of deen. But he's also sending a message. He's telling the guy, because don't forget, this is the same guy that did not mention him 6 years ago. Like he's already asked him for help before, and he didn't help him. So he's telling him, like, just so we're clear, I'm not asking you for help. Just so we're clear, I'm not begging to be freed from here. You're offering me freedom. I'm saying, wait, go ask, let him go figure out what happened there. Make sure he clears my name, then I'll accept his invite. And guess what? I'm already clear. My Lord knows that I didn't do anything. I'm not ashamed. I had nothing to be ashamed of. I stood my ground and they did harm to me. I'm very good. I'm confident. I'll be here for the rest of my life if that's what it takes. But if I step out there, I'm not going to step out there as a favor done to me. To hold my head low and say, oh, thank you, King. Thank you so much. You've helped me so much. And I owe him my life now. And I have to bow down to him whenever I see him. He's like, no. I'm not getting out as a favor. I'm getting out because I deserve it. When that's the reason why they're calling me out, I'll leave. Does that make sense to you? That was his reasoning? He said, Inna Rabbi bi kaydihinna alim. As for my Lord, he's well aware. This is fine. Go make sure that this gets corrected in the court system and in the records, then I'll leave. Just pure confidence, pure strength, a very bold, risky move. It could have backfired on him. But thing is, bold people take bold moves. They take risks. And these risks sometimes backfire. And sometimes they don't work. And sometimes they have to deal with the punishment of it. But they'll never stop being bold, confident people. And they will never stop being those kind of people to take his spot. If a pioneer goes out, a mujahid, and he gets killed fi sabilillah, he gets the highest honor. There will be other mujahideen. There will be others, pioneers who have that blood. They're the bold, they are leader spirit, they are alpha personality, you want to use that language. That's just in their blood. He can't just be a nobody. So he'll step up. He doesn't fear that, well, I could be killed. He's like, his blood runs that way. Yeah, sure, I could get killed, I'll take that risk. And he's the next one, and the next one, next one. Now the average person, 99.99%, they'll never take those risks. They like to just, stand, fear and just stay in the box. But there will always be a supply of somebody willing to take that risk. Now, that's the promise of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, by the way. And in this ummah, there will always be a supply of those people who are willing to take those risks and keep trying. Now, just because they keep trying doesn't mean Allah has decreed for that era, for that era to succeed. But there's always in every era somebody who's still knocking on the door. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. And the less it is, the darker it is in the ummah, the more hasanat you get for lighting a candle. Because the candle is that much more needed. Somebody needs to champion this. And I'll give you an example because we keep talking about like Islamic. There's one of our teachers who taught us Arabic when I was a student, may Allah Ta'ala bless him. He was a very old man. He told us, he's Egyptian. He said, I lived in Egypt during the French occupation and during the British influence and this and that. And he said the efforts at that time to change the official language of Egypt from classical Fusha Arabic, and not just Egypt, by the way, all the Arab countries. And he said there was strong efforts and strong legislation being pushed through. And there was strong attempts to prioritize French and English. That succeeded in some regions, but it failed ultimately on a countrywide level. And they succeeded in other countries. In Turkey, they changed the scripts. In Thailand, if I'm not mistaken, the language used to be written in Arabic script. They changed it. In Somalia, the Somali language used to be written in Arabic script, and now it's written in English, Latin letters, even though it's the same language. They just wrote in English or Latin script. So they banned the adhan in Turkey, in the Arabic adhan, and so on. And so they attempted the same things in Egypt, my point is. So this teacher who was teaching us Arabic, he was a professor, had a doctorate in Arabic language. He wasn't a sheikh or anything by any means, but he was saying, in my era, I observed the scholars of Arabic language take a stand for the language. That was their field, that was their expertise. And they constantly were doing jihad in the way of, we must ensure that the Arabic language remains the official language of Egypt. We must ensure. And then the sheikhs at the time were passing fatwas that it's, we're getting sidetracked, but it's an interesting tidbit of history. They were passing fatwas that it's haram to learn French. It's haram to learn French. Now, I've seen people pull up these fatwas that you could find them online, and they laugh at them. Look at these backwards. They're always keeping us back, these scholars, man. They just, haram to learn French. It's haram to learn English. Some fatwas said that from the 70s and whatnot. And they had a vision. This teacher of ours, he told us at the time the French government was flooding money into Egypt and putting up these institutes where, or even telling people to get free tickets to go to France to learn French. But they were taking the youth of Egypt, the Muslims, going and brainwashing them in France to learn all their nastiness and come back and spread that fasad and brainwash the people. So the scholars in response were passing fatwas. It's haram. It's haram to take these free tickets. It's haram to take this free institute to learn French and so on. So there was wisdom there. You can easily laugh and say, oh, they're backwards, holding us back. But the truth was the exact opposite. They had a vision, they had an understanding, they had forward vision, and they did the best that they could. And by Allah's permission, alhamdulillah, they failed to change the official language of Egypt from Fusha Arabic. And to my knowledge, they failed in majority of Arabic countries. They succeeded once or twice here and there. But alhamdulillah, even in those countries where they succeeded, there has been a very sharp reversal. And obviously Turkey being the prime example by Allah's blessing and permission. May Allah bless the leadership over there who have made extreme changes in the past 15 or so years. So know your history. Know the tools of the enemy and know what they've been trying with us. And you never know which field Allah will call you towards. You never know which field you will be a hero for this ummah. Going back to these fighters, Khabib and them, they are inspiring a masculine a warrior, strength, culture, reviving it in the Muslim Ummah like I've never seen in my lifetime, and I think has not been around for 100 years. And it came out of complete left field in a way that nobody expected. May Allah Ta'ala bless them and bless all the heroes. Whichever field Allah brings you forward in, whatever your skills and talents, Allah will tap you in, and it's up to you to see if you are going to be worthy and put your efforts for the sake of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. All right, so the king called the women to court, and he called the main one was the wife of the minister, the wife of the Aziz, and she said, "Oh yeah, now the truth is out." She couldn't lie at this point. Khalas, she's in the king's court. The risk is higher. Now she's not under the safety of her husband. The king is not going to give you clemency like her husband did. You're going to get punished. And the ladies are just ready. The second you lie, the ladies are ready to say, no, she's lying and it was her fault and so on. So the truth is out. She said, it was I who tried to seduce him, and he is in fact telling the truth. And then Yusuf alayhi salam, so this fast forwards, Yusuf alayhi salam is saying, I did all this. I insisted on not leaving my prison cell until you get this court, just so he can know that I did not betray him, the Aziz. I did not betray the minister who was my master. I did not betray him in secret. I was a slave unjustly. I was not supposed to be a slave. I was a free man, a free boy, right? But I was forced into slavery. And despite that, I never considered once to betray the man who had me in his house. It's not who I am. It's not because I owe them anything. It's because I'm the person of integrity. And so the king now knows that, in fact, I never betrayed, despite my situation. And by the way, this is not just because of his righteousness, but this is because of him, again, everything we've seen in this surah, it's a mix between his righteousness and sincerity, alayhi salam, as well as his wisdom and his making the correct chess move every time. So he said, I had to do all this so he could know that I don't betray. I'm a loyal person. Okay, now I'll accept to leave prison. Here's why. He's about to get a job from the king, right? A very high position, a minister. What does Trump do whenever he hires people? A couple of months later, what does he do? He fires them, then he tweets about them. They were begging me like a dog and whatever, right? How many times has he done that? He curses out his ex-VP now, his vice president, Mike Pence, right? He's always insulting him every other day. That was your vice president. He doesn't miss a chance to insult him. He has fired 500 people and insulted them. If he was king, if he could get their heads chopped off, he would have done it. It would have been a public display. Because that's what dictators do. These other dictators from these other countries, Stalin and whatnot. Do you guys remember when he, you probably studied it in social studies, where there's like a photo that they, every time he would kill one of the people that was in the photo, they would Photoshop it. And they didn't have Photoshop. They would just do some editing and then repost the photo because it was like a public image. And now the guy's missing because he had him killed. You guys don't remember that? That propaganda they taught us in history class? So, so anyhow, that's how it works. That's Trump's dream. If he could get away with it, he definitely would. So what happens here? Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam is like, I'm not going to get out and take a minister position, because he was a minister. He became a minister, right? Like literally that day. The king offered him the post and he accepted it. He said, I'm not going to take a minister position because you gave me a favor. Because in a couple of weeks, when you don't like me or you hear something bad or whatever, you're going to chop off my head, or you're going to say, hey, you owe me everything. You owe me allegiance. You owe me. He's like, I'm not taking that. I'll stay in prison. I don't need this nonsense. You deal with yourself. If you want my help, I'm coming out with full dignity, integrity, and exoneration because I deserve it. And you will know that I never betrayed that other guy. You'll hear those rumors. So he said, if he just accepted, he never said, bring the women to your court and get an official testimony and put me on the record as officially exonerated. The king would obviously hear stories about this man. Oh, he cheated with the wife of this guy. He'd be like, okay, well, this is the guy I hired. So now I know I could push and pull him like any other politician. Like the Jeffrey Epstein, all these politicians, right? That's how they do. They push and pull with this nonsense. So he said, no, you're not going to do that with me. You leave me in this prison to rot, I'll take it. If you want me to serve, I'll come and serve with my head held high. Nobody done me any favors. And so the king will understand truthfully, it's a very bold move to say, call those women and let them give testimony. That means you're sure you're innocent, right? Right? If he was not innocent, God forbid, right? If he was not innocent, and then the king is offering him clemency, he says, bring him to me. He'll say, oh, great, cool, thanks. I'll take it. Keep your mouth shut. He's not going to say, bring those women from 6 years ago, let them testify in the official court of the king. You only do that if you're sure that you're innocent, right? And there's no evidence against you whatsoever. So it was a very bold move, and it paid off for him. And it sent a message to the king that this man is truly full of integrity, innocent, and he's not disloyal in any way. It told the whole story of Yusuf alayhi salam. And the king was just even more impressed. This guy's a risk taker, and this guy's very capable. He described the dream very efficiently when nobody else could. And look at this. He's going out of his way to show that his integrity is everything to him, and he will never be disloyal to me, which is a very good trait that the king wants. And that's why he said, أستخلصه لنفسي. The second time he said, okay, now bring him to me. He said, أستخلصه لنفسي. The second ayah when he says, he said, Allah doesn't, this is so that he may know I did not betray him in secret, and that Allah does not guide the scheming of the betrayers. So he said, like, I made sure that everybody gets to see that these people who schemed, yeah, it took a couple of years, but they got exposed and humiliated in public. And I knew this was going to happen, and when I had the power to make it so, I would show, so to show everybody that if you betray, Allah will never guide your scheme, and Allah will never give you success. You may get some limited time reprieve, or indhar, maybe Allah allows you to hide for a while, but ultimately you will be exposed in this world or the next. So he says, وَمَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي. I don't like the translation here. It says, I don't claim to be innocent, or I don't claim to have not made mistakes. إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبِّي. He said, I don't claim, مَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي, meaning my nafs. I'm not claiming that my nafs is completely divine. He's not saying I made any mistake with these women. I didn't. But he's saying, listen, I'm human just like you. Because don't forget, there are some not translations, or some interpretations that they say, well, prophets are prophets. They don't have desires. They don't even desire to do evil. So they're like angels in that case. So in that case, like, what's the challenge? Right? If he was tempted by that woman, Allah says, وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا. She desired him and he desired her. And then he said no. Some people said, no, how can you say that about a prophet? He desired her. He's a human being, he's a young man in her home. She's tempting him. But he refused. He didn't do anything at all. Nothing haram whatsoever with her. The only way that it's noble for him to not have done any haram is that his nafs told him to do it. Right? So if you are a multi-billionaire, and then I give you a suitcase full of, $100,000. I tell you, hey, can you, deliver it to my cousin? I say, sure. And I didn't take anything from it. I was not even tempted for 1 second to steal that money. Are you impressed? Why? Hey, come on, that's nothing to you. That's pennies to you. It would be insulting if you even looked or considered that money. It would be humiliating for you to even be tempted for 1 split second, right? If you go to an very old, person under deathbed and they don't get tempted to do zina, I mean, that's normal, like, right? There's nothing impressive about that. It becomes impressive, or it's actually a noble trait when they were tempted. Their nafs is telling them they're human just like everybody else, and they resist for the sake of Allah, for the sake of discipline, even at their own expense, like Prophet Yusuf ﷺ was. So I don't accept the people who try to interpret it as respectfully. They say, well, he's a prophet, he didn't have the same desires. He's saying here, مَا أُبَرِّئُ نَفْسِي. My nafs, I'm not saying my nafs is bari, meaning it's completely doesn't. He said after إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَأَمَّارَةٌ بِالسُّوءِ. The nafs asks you to do evil, or encourages you or commands you to do evil. So yeah, I have a nafs just like everybody else. I'm human just like everybody else. I get tempted just like everybody else. So he's saying I'm human. I'm human only. I don't claim that I don't make mistakes in life, but I didn't make this mistake. This foul, vile, dishonorable mistake, I didn't do that one. But I'm capable of making mistakes. I've made other mistakes that were not dishonorable like that. And he said, truly my Lord is forgiving and merciful. So the king said, bring him to me and I will reserve him for myself. And when he had a conversation with Yusuf alayhi salam, the king now said to him, إِنَّكَ الْيَوْمَ لَدَيْنَا مَكِينٌ أَمِينٌ. From this day forward, you are both makeen and ameen. So the king said, وَقَالَ الْمَلِكُ ائْتُونِي بِهِ أَسْتَخْلِصُ لِنَفْسِي. Yes. He said to them, now bring him to me and I will keep him to myself. I will reserve him for myself. Very fascinating phrasing here. So the king was absolutely and utterly impressed by this young man, and he was just absolutely sold. I'm أَسْتَخْلِصُ لِنَفْسِي. I'm not just bringing him here. I'm going to make him my inner cabinet. I'm so convinced that this young man is high caliber and high value for me and loyal. Every good trait, I just saw it through this man rapid fire. He's loyal. He didn't betray the guy who was a slave in his house. He was resistant to temptation. He was willing to sacrifice 6-7 years of his life at a young age just to not give it to temptation. He refused to step out of prison until he was exonerated. He refused to take any favors from the king. He said, who is this man? أستخلصه لنفسي. I need this man in my inner circle. I can't trust any of these slimy politicians, but I'm going to trust him. So he said, so this, the phrasing, Allah doesn't just say any type of phrasing. When Allah says, أستخلصه لنفسي, the king said, I want him for me specifically. I want him close to me. That shows how impressed he was. There's a reason Allah told us that phrase. He could have just said, he hired him and put him as a minister. But Allah said, no, he used this phrase. He was so impressed. He was admiring Yusuf alayhi salam. And that is the case. Bold risk takers, if their risk pays off, if they don't fail in their risk, people get really impressed. And so you got to be calculated, of course, but some people just have it in their blood. Other people, they have to fight their cowardice, and they have to take bold risks for the sake of Allah. And inshallah ta'ala, it pays off. And when it doesn't, you have to, brush off your shoulder and try again. And that not everybody, Yusuf alayhi salam, because some people say, well, God is with me, and therefore if I take a risk for his sake, I'm going to succeed right away. No, Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam is coming out of a 7-year prison stint that he didn't deserve. He took a bold risk with the lady before, refusing to get involved, even though she said, I'm going to punish you if you don't. He said, that's fine. He was a bold risk taker then, for the sake of Allah, not just random risks. And it cost him. And he paid the price. He said, oh, you know what? I wasn't bluffing. I'll stay in prison. And when he was offered the freedom, he said, I told you I wasn't bluffing. I'll stay here until it gets cleared. So then he took the risk taking, paid off. Again, reasonable, wise, confident, sincere risk taking, not just random. Don't go skydive and say, Badawy told me to take risks. All right? Some nonsense. Okay? So but a bold Muslim who does things for the sake of Allah, it'll pay off sometimes and it won't other times, but ultimately in the akhirah it will pay off more than you can imagine. And we need those pioneers. We need those trailblazers. We need people to stand up for the sake of Allah. We need people to be the first person to put hijab on in their family in 50 years. We need people to be the first person to pray in their household, even if their parents hate them. Hate that Salah is more important than your parents, right? There's some things that you can negotiate with. Prayer is not one of them, right? And guess what? In most cases that I've observed, by Allah's permission, and many of you are here, that person gets resisted for the first 3-4 years in their household, and by the 4th year, their mom starts praying. And the 5th year, dad starts praying. And the 6th year, their sibling starts wearing hijab. I've seen it more times than I can count. Many of you guys have those kind of stories. So they'll resist you, but it's for the sake of Allah. You still have an obligation to be kind, to be polite, to be gentle, not to be forceful and angry and show them a terrible impression of Islam. That's still your obligation. Don't say like, well, I'm doing it for the sake of Allah, so I have the excuse to be nasty. No, even if they're nasty to you, you have now an obligation to reflect the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in his actions. So that's your challenge. That might be your challenge, right? And guess what? You end up reviving Islam in your bloodline after it was at risk of being eradicated, God forbid, right? And you might be the first person to make Hajj in your family in 100 years. You might be the first person to make Umrah in your family in 100 years. You might be the reason why the next 5 generations or whatever until the end of the world, forever inshallah, but I think the end of the world is probably a couple of generations. It's clipped for everybody, right, at this point. But from here on out, you're going to be the reason why the rest of your bloodline is practicing Muslims again, inshallah. After it was stamped out for 50 years, communism or this or that or the other, right? SubhanAllah, it happens. It happens. It's a story as true as day that we see today. Imagine that. You will be the hero of your family and your bloodline in Jannah. And they will attribute, by Allah's permission, they will attribute the righteousness of 1,000 people with the same blood, the same tribe, the same family. They will attribute it to you. They'll say that was the person. Male or female, by the way. It's not, people always assume it's going to be a male. Not necessarily. It's whoever is bold for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, we're wrapping up inshallah. So he said, Astakhlisu li nafsi. He was so impressed by this, the perfect lieutenant. So he said, bring him to me. And then he said, إِنَّكَ الْيَوْمَ لَدَيْنَا مَكِينٌ أَمِينٌ. Again, Allah is telling us the phrase, the private convo that the king had with Yusuf alayhi salam. Why would Allah tell us the private conversation unless it's significant? He said, أَسْتَخْلِصُ لِنَفْسِي. I need this man for me. I need him in my private, in my personal cabinet. Then the king said to Yusuf alayhi salam, إِنَّكَ الْيَوْمَ لَدَيْنَا مَكِينٌ أَمِينٌ. From here on out, from this day forward, you are ladayna, you are with me. And he said, you are makeen and amin. Makeen, it comes from the word tamkeen, makkana, meaning to be solidified, to be rooted, firmly rooted. And he said, Amin, meaning you're entrusted. He's trustworthy, also obviously Amin, but he's entrusted. I'm going to give you some real responsibilities. Because hey, don't forget, the whole reason I'm impressed by you initially was you saw the dream. You told me Egypt is going to be in complete catastrophe. So get to work, Like, I need you. I need you to save me because I'm the king. They're going to chop my head if everybody dies, right? So he said to him, إِنَّكَ الْيَوْمَ لَدَيْنَا. Look at this. The king, at the end of the day, politicians, as much as we hate 99% of them, 99.99 actually, let me be fair. They're smart, they're clever. You know, whether you agree with their sliminess or not, at the end of the day, they're clever. This king was not particularly slimy, by the way. He wasn't. He was a wise person. But again, whether you hate them or like them, usually they get to their position by being smart and clever, right? They have emotional intelligence. They have social intelligence. They can read people. So the king understood, you know, from one leader to another, one alpha male to another, he understood why Yusuf alayhi salam is doing this. He went through this whole journey, all these steps, he took all these risks before he would accept freedom from me. So he understood, this man is a man of integrity. I have to offer him something. I have to speak to him on his language, his level. So he said, Astakhlisu li nafsi, you're going to be in my inner cabinet. So you only answer to me. Nobody can get you fired except me. You answer, there's no boss above you except myself. Don't worry about that minister. He cannot get retribution. He cannot get revenge on you because you don't answer to him anymore. You're above him now. So he said, you're close to me, so rest assured. Number two, you're makeen. Makeen meaning you're firmly rooted. Nobody's going to take this job from you. Nobody's going to harm you again. I give you this guarantee from me. Like, you're a close member of my cabinet now. And then you're ameen, meaning you're trustworthy. I trust you, but I'm now going to give you some serious responsibilities because of this catastrophe you have predicted. You said we got to get to work right now, so let's do it. So the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam responded to this, and he said, اجعلني على خزائن الأرض إني حفيظ عليم. So instead of saying, oh, thank you so much, and he just kept his mouth closed, I got a position with the king, let me not try my luck. He said, okay, cool. Thank you, thanks for this. He said, اجعلني على خزائن الأرض. Now, in order for me to do this job that you're asking me to do, put me in charge of the treasury. In khaza'in, the storehouses, where they're going to store all the food for the next 7 years. Because if you guys remember, the dream that he interpreted was, we're going to have 7 good years of crops, and then 7 terrible years, no crops, and then finally the 15th year, we'll get crops again. So the next 14 years, we're going to have 7 good years, but if people do not store 90% of the food, if we live like we have good years, for the next 7 years, we're all going to die. Most people are going to die. So we have to have 7 years of good times, but we have to treat them like they're bad times. If we don't do that, then we will not be prepared for the bad times. And we said that's a lesson for us today. You cannot argue that we're not in late stage empire. We are in the last stages of the US empire. If you're living like tomorrow's guaranteed, even though we're in a recession, jobs are getting laid off, high-tech jobs, AI is threatening everybody else's job, automation, self-driving cars are threatening jobs left and right, and salaries are going down, inflation is going up, and you're living like, well, look at me, I got an $80,000 salary, I got a $100,000 salary, I go on vacations twice a year. You're not saving, you're not considering anything, you're completely asleep at the wheel. You are going to be first on the chopping block. And it's a reality. When you're living in good times, you have to be aware. You have to be aware. Perhaps good times don't last forever. They never do. But yeah, you might say, well, they might last another 20 years. Leave me alone. They might. It's certainly possible. It might get better. Allah alam. Nobody can predict the future guaranteed. But a lot of signs in our era are pointing to exactly what Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam said. We're going to have some good years, but immediately after there's going to be some bad ones. Right? And if you take no precaution, or at least if you don't take any precaution, or even a lot of precaution during the good times, you are in deep trouble when the bad times come. May Allah protect us. So it's a very big lesson. I think there's a lot of wisdom in Allah mentioning this story in the Quran. So Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam said, put me in charge of the treasury. And then he said a statement that we have to discuss. He said, Inni hafidhun alim. I am, let me see the translation here. He said, I am honest and knowledgeable. And hafidh is not necessarily, honest is not perhaps the best translation. Hafidh, I'm good at, I'm skilled at protecting the treasury. And I'm very knowledgeable about this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him that knowledge, and he knew exactly what to do, and nobody else would be as convinced because he interpreted the dream and he knew it was from Allah. So he knew for sure that nobody else in the land, no other minister, the person who's currently in charge of the treasury, he's not as convinced that we're going to have 7 bad years. I know for a fact that's coming. Just like Prophet Nuh alayhi salam building the ark. Allah says every time they passed by, when they were building the ark, the people laughed at them. There's no water here. You're building an ark in the middle of the desert. And they laughed at them for years and years and years. But the only person who will continue to build the ark is somebody with pure conviction. The storm is coming. The storm is coming. Everybody else would lose conviction after a while. And everybody else will say, we have 7 good years. Why are you acting like we're poor? Why are you saving so much? Come on, the times are good. So he knew that it has to be me. And Allah had given him knowledge of what to do. So he said, اجعلني على خزائن الأرض إني حفيظ عليم. Put me in charge of the storehouses or the treasury, and because I'm honest and knowledgeable. So we'll stop here and we'll just have a reflection, because you guys have heard before that in Islam, in Islam you should not do two things. You should not nominate yourself, and also you should not praise yourself. Correct? You guys have heard that? And I've said that to you, quite a few, right? You shouldn't nominate yourself. And you should not seek leadership, and you should not praise yourself either. Hafidun Alim, I am this, I am that, I'm trustworthy, I'm capable, I'm that. So how do we understand what Prophet Yusuf ﷺ did? Well, first of all, what's my proof for the fact that you should not nominate yourself or praise yourself in Islam? Do I have proof, or just an idea? Okay. So there's a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, you're correct, there's several, that he tells us we do not, paraphrasing, we the ummah, the Muslim ummah, do not give leadership to those who seek it, who request it. We don't give them their request. That's one hadith. There's plenty of more. There's one that I have in front of me in Bukhari and Muslim, in which the Prophet ﷺ told a Sahabi named Abdelrahman ibn Samura, radiallahu anh, he told him, do not ask for authority. If it is given to you at your request, you will be held fully responsible for it. But if it is given to you without your request, Allah will help you in succeeding in it. So that's one hadith. There are several, the one we just mentioned. So that's your proof. So that's good proof. What's a proof that you shouldn't praise yourself in Islam? Jazakallah khair. The general sentiment, the message that's over and over in Islam: be humble, have humility, don't be overpraising of yourself. وَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنِ اتَّقَى, right? Or بِمَنِ اهْتَدَى. Allah says, do not praise yourselves, do not ascribe purity and purification to yourselves. Don't claim that you have taqwa. You never know. You can seek taqwa, but don't tell people, hey, I'm a muttaqi. I'm for sure have taqwa. I'm a righteous person. Who are you to say that? We're not allowed to say that about ourselves. We try our best to seek righteousness, and we hope that Allah approves of it on the Day of Judgment and says, you were indeed righteous. Huwa a'lamu biman ittaqa. Only Allah knows who is truly muttaqi. So anybody have anything to add? What exception do we give for... Yes, it's a trait of shaitan, Jazakallah khairan, where he said, خلقته من نار خلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين. You created me. I'm not going to bow to Adam. You created me from dirt, from fire, and you created from dirt. So he was so arrogant, and he was sitting with the angels, so he got big-headed about it, and that was his fatal flaw and his downfall. Jazakallah khairan. So how do we understand what Prophet Yusuf ﷺ did? He nominated himself, and he, I don't want to use the word praised himself, but you can say that. Yes. So there was urgency, and he was the only man for the job, and there was no time to kill. We have to start right now. I can't allow, the stakes were too high, so I have to nominate myself because I'm the only one who could do it. Jazakallah khair. So there was a need. Yes. Jazakallah khair. So in his situation, it was very clear that there was no conflict of interest. He wasn't doing it because there was more power in this position. He was already nominated by the king. The king had already put him, astakhlistu li nafsi, he's on my top list. He's already, khalas, he got all the status that comes with it. So he's not moving up anymore. He's just saying, okay, in that case, then, khalas, you've established me, makinun amin. All right, now put me on this. All right, now it's time to work. Give me this job. So he didn't ask for more power, more status, more. He's just saying, all right, now time to get to work, but I need to be in charge of this thing. So he didn't ask for anything more. So in that case, he didn't ask for any extra power. He asked for a lateral move, what they call, right? He just moved. He got the power. He got nominated by the king. Now he's like, all right, give me this task because I'm good at it. Any other thoughts? Okay, so for those who are writing down, you got to write this down. When we say in Islam, when you understand the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ who says, we as an ummah, we do not give leadership or imara to those who seek it. He is talking about Islamic leadership. Well, two types of leadership. Islamic leadership, like being an imam or a scholar or whatnot. And number two, government positions. And of course, you can add number three, which, is the same overall thought, which is any position where there is a very obvious conflict of interest. And I'll give you examples. I'll make it very clear. So he's talking primarily, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about Islamic leadership and government positions. And the Sahaba he was telling this to were seeking government positions. They were young men and they said, "Oh Messenger of Allah, give us a position. We see that you've given Umar and Abu Bakr, give us a position." And he said, "Oh young men, in this ummah, when people ask for leadership, we don't grant it to them. You've just disqualified yourself by asking for it." Or مَنْ طَلَبَهَا أَوْ كَانَ حَرِيصًا عَلَيْهَا. Whoever seeks it or requests it, or we notice from their actions that they are very keen on it. So he might be like, "Oh, I don't want to ask it because they'll catch me out. So let me just not ask directly, but I'll make it very clear that," or like, "all my actions prove that I really want that position." In that case, either way, we should disqualify that person from that position if he's trying really hard to get leadership. Again, Islamic leadership or government leadership, or one that is very major conflict of interest. And the reason being here is that these positions I just mentioned are all public service. You are a public servant. It's not the private sector, which we'll talk about in a second. You're not asking for a higher position in your company, which is perfectly fine. We'll talk about the government and Islamic leadership is you're a public servant. If you're the sheikh, you're the imam. If you're the president, if you're the governor, you're a public servant. Your salary comes from the people. You answer to the people. You are in charge of the well-being of the people who you now have disproportionate power over. Okay? And because of that dynamic, because of how sensitive it is, and because obviously it should be done for the sake of Allah, especially the religious part, which is very clear. The government one might not be clear for a lot of people, but I'm clarifying it now. In both cases, you're a public servant. You should not be doing it for your own interest. You should be primarily doing it for the sake of Allah, and secondly for people's interest. Your interest comes last, which is in the form of some general standard compensation. They pay you for your time or whatnot, and you are accepting, by choosing to be in Islamic leadership or government leadership, you are accepting that I'm going to be under more scrutiny in this dunya. People are going to hold me to a higher standard. They're going to double check when I do things more. If you don't like it, don't take the post. Don't accept the post. Also, I will be under higher scrutiny in the akhirah as well. Okay? Because you got higher power, you got more trust and a higher position in this world in something that should be for the sake of Allah. So you're accepting that you'll be under more scrutiny in God's court. That you fulfilled your amana even that much more. If you don't like that, then don't accept it. And that's why most of our ulama that they refused. Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu, or rahmahullah, was thrown in prison because he refused to take a government post as a sheikh. They told him, "Listen, we'll let you give fatwas. We're not gonna command you to give fatwas in our favor." He said, "No, that's what you say now. But when I get the post, you're gonna do it." So they threw him in prison. Imam al-Nawawi rahmahullah, they told him, "We need you to become a government mufti." He said no, and he was in Syria, Damascus at the time. He said, "No, I'm not gonna do it." They said, "There's a need. We have a situation. The ummah is going through trouble. We need you." He said, "Nope, I'm not doing it. I know what this leads to." So they said, "Okay, you're too popular. We can't throw you in prison. It's going to cause some turmoil. So you're exiled. You got to leave." So he said, "Okay, I'll take it. I'm leaving." And he got kicked out. And he said, "I'll take that instead of working for the government." Even though they told him, "Look, man, you can do it. It'll be an honest job. We're not going to ask you to be corrupt." He said, I know where this usually leads. I'm not accepting that." Now, other scholars historically, because like we said earlier, sometimes you just got to do it. Other people have a different viewpoint. They said, "If I don't take it, some corrupt person will. So it's better me than them." So it's ijtihad. And perhaps they had different circumstances. Sometimes they were much more clear that there was being corruption. Maybe Abu Hanifa saw that in his era, there was nothing I could do that would be of value, and I'm not willing to take that risk. Other eras, they said, "No, maybe there's some khair to be done." So like you can't judge any scholar that appears to be sincere, that accepts some of these posts or the advisory or whatnot. Only Allah will judge between them on the Day of Judgment. Anyhow, public sector, when you're supposed to be a public servant, you should not seek higher positions because they come with a lot of power, a lot of trust, and a lot of responsibility, and it's supposed to be for the sake of Allah and for the sake of the people, not for your own private interest. In those public servant positions, you're allowed to seek a position when there is a desperate need, or you're the best man for the job or the best woman for the job, and we gave the example, very, very simple one, but probably comes up often. If you're with your group of friends, 3 people, salah time comes, and it's only your 3, and somebody needs to be the imam, somebody needs to lead the prayer. The person who is most qualified in terms of Quran, they recite the Quran most properly, and they have the most Quran memorized, and they know the rules of salah, the fiqh of prayer, they should step up. It should not be "No, please, tfaddal." No. The person who's most qualified should step up. They should not feel shy, because The other two, especially if the other two cannot recite properly, it is haram for them to step up, even if somebody pushes them. It's haram. If you cannot recite the Quran properly, you don't know Fatiha properly, you have like one or two surahs memorized, and there's somebody there who knows the fiqh of prayer, who recites beautifully or at least properly, you shouldn't even attempt. It's not even a question of respect, and it's a matter of this person's more qualified, they step up. It's like, and it's your amana, it's everybody's responsibility to know their place and know their hierarchy. Now, the only time it's fine to say tfaddal, tfaddal, if everybody knows, everybody in the row meets the minimum standard, they all recite Quran properly, and they all like meet the minimum standard, salah's gonna be valid, in which case they can say, no, please, you go ahead, okay? So that's just one example, and you can apply it many other times. So for example, you're in a community where there is no service for kids, ages, whatever. Like your kids are a certain age, and they don't have any programs for those kids. And you sent a request to the masjid, hey, can we make a program for these kids? Yeah, inshallah, we'll get to it. And 6 months go by, and they don't do anything. You remind them again, inshallah, sorry, we know we can't find somebody. In which case, you might step up and say, you know what, I've learned a little bit about the deen. Somebody needs to step up for this age group. I'll volunteer. In this case, you're stepping up because there's clearly a need. Nobody's stepping up. You're gonna, Allah now will aid you for it. You'll do the best you can. You're gonna stay in your lane. You're not gonna become a mufti and do things wrong. But in this case, you can clearly see this person doesn't want status or prestige. This person is not looking for leadership. They're saying someone has to step up to the plate, so I did it. Okay? Any questions in this regard? So somebody once asked me when I said this, they said, well, how? How do you rise in the ranks of your community Islamically? And that's a good question. The more you seek knowledge, the more you become humble towards Allah, the less you should be desiring to rise in the ranks. And the examples are all these mashayikh who did not, I told you, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, and many of the Sahaba, they ran away from the leadership. They said, I don't want that responsibility. We want to be busy with ilm and so on, and you guys, I want to teach lessons and let someone else bother with that, right? Bottom line is, the more sincere you are, the closer you are to ilm, the less you'll seek it naturally. It just humbles your spirit. But secondly, how do you rise in the ranks? Your superiors, your teachers, your ulama, your leaders, your mentors, they appoint you. That is the job of those ahead of you. Again, like I said, if there's a need and nobody's filling it and nobody's appointing you, then if you need to step up, step up. But otherwise, it is the job of those ahead of you to start appointing and keep pushing, and that's their job. They have to appoint the next in line, right? So that's usually how you rise, and you get ijaza, or you get authority to teach or to rise or to have a responsibility from those who are ahead of you. Wallahu alam. Or your community nominates you. There's a few methods, but as you can see, the pattern in those methods is that you don't nominate yourself out of humbleness, out of sincerity. Same thing applies to politics. Sometimes you live in such a corrupt, evil world where you're like, I have to step up. I have the leadership capability, I have the drive, I have the desire, I have the patience to deal with that minefield, I have the technical skills, and look at everybody who runs for positions is corrupt and evil. So then you have to, right? And may Allah aid you in that. Now, finally, I will say that, so we said the only times you're prohibited from like seeking leadership is from Islamic and government, like public stuff. Now, anything private, anything outside of that, you are perfectly allowed to nominate yourself. You're perfectly allowed to praise yourself, as in to promote yourself, but be wise about it and be humble about it and be noble about it. So, for example, you have a business, and you're an honest business, and you say, we're honest, we have a great record, everyone rates us 5 stars, whatever, and you promote yourself, you make advertisement. Yeah, sure. If you're working at a company, are you allowed to go seek a promotion? Go to your boss and request a promotion? Yes or no? Of course. Are you allowed to praise yourself in that meeting? Be like, hey, listen. They'll say, hey, why should I give you a promotion? Be like, well, I've never been late. I'm better than, this, whatever. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's just part of the job. There's no conflict of interest here. They're not like, you're not there for the sake of Allah, you're working, but it's a different type. The work is work. It's not a public service, it's a private service. And you're allowed to rise in the ranks. That's a private business, doesn't matter. And secondly, like nobody's there under the impression that you've taken this job as a chemical engineer in some shampoo company. Nobody's under the impression that you did this because of you believe in the cause. Since I was a kid, I've dreamed about making people's hair soft and all that. Kind of get out of here. Everybody knows you're there for the paycheck and that's it. So when you go and say, hey, there's no conflict of interest, there's no ambiguity, there's no trickery. You're like, hey, listen, I'm here for the promotion, I'm here to rise in the ranks. Otherwise, I quit and I go somewhere else. Perfectly fine. Look out for your own interest because that's all you're there for. There's no, you get what I'm saying? You see the difference between that and a public sector? Put me as mayor. I want to be mayor. If you're doing it because you're like, bro, as mayor, I have all the skills, I have all the connections, I get to shake hands with really powerful people, I get, to get into the stock market, I get to have bodyguards. No, now this is hypocrisy. This is evil. There's a big difference between that and getting a promotion at your job. All right. And finally, I'll say that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a plan for you, when you make dua, when you're sincere, when you sacrifice for His sake, when you take bold steps for His sake, like Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, calculated, strategic, bold chess moves, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ensure that you rise and you get elevated, even if He makes the king seek you out. The most powerful person in all the land, the Pharaoh, was requesting Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam in prison, and he said, no thanks. Before I get out of here, you got to figure this out, then come ask for me again. Allah sent him the king in his service to beg for him to come out of prison so he could give him the highest post in the land after the king. Because of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam's sincerity and his dua and his bold moves. He risked, and the risk didn't pan out initially. It panned out in the plan of Allah, but as far as dunya is concerned, he had to sit. فَلَبِثَ فِي السِّجْنِ بِضْعَ سِنِينَ. He remained in prison a couple of years. How many of us are going to be willing to take that when our sacrifice for Allah's sake doesn't pan out the first time? You lose the job. You say, you know what? You step into the office and say, hey, listen, if you don't give me Jum'ah off, I have to leave this job. He goes like, all right, you're out. Some Jew tells you, hey, you're out. So then you're like, oh, man, I should have stayed. And you start doubting your principles and whatever. But later on, you get a job that's 10 times better. But you had to wait. You had to wait 6-7 years, maybe, right? So sincerity it's not going to show up immediately. And we gave the example, I really hate to mention normal average human beings compared to these prophets, salawatullahi wa alayhim ajma'in, but perhaps this is an example that's more recent. Muhammad Ali, rahmatullah alayhi, right? He refused to go fight in unjust war. And they took his titles and said, you can't compete. In the prime of his championship, in the prime of his youth, and so on. He said, all right, fine. Do what you got to do. You think I'm going to back down? I will not back down. And they told him, look, you're a famous guy. Everybody knows you. We're not going to give you like a combat post. You're not going to risk dying. You're just going to be the face of it. And he said, yeah, I know that. You're going to give me a cushy job that I just go sleep in the bed and just... He's like, but then you'll use my star power, you'll use my fame to convince other men to go die for this unjust war. I'm not taking that either. So whatever you can take away from me, take it. And they took it. And then, subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, several years later, Allah brought him back and gave him everything after that. But the sacrifice was needed. In those 3 years, he had no idea if he'd ever compete again. He had no idea if they'd ever lift it. He had no idea if it's going to pan out. But a bold person with principle and integrity takes bold moves, and he's fully ready to pay the whole price. Just like many of our brothers and sisters in Palestine who are now getting out of prison after years or decades. May Allah Ta'ala accept them and accept their sacrifices. Those people, in my eyes, in my belief, are significantly higher in the eyes of Allah than Muhammad Ali, rahmatullahi alayh. He is a very good, inshallah, noble person, inshallah, may Allah accept from him. But I would believe that those people from that noble land of and their sacrifices are higher in the eyes of Allah, and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's in the hearts. So those are just some examples. Once again, when you are serving Allah, when you are bold for the sake of Allah, when you make dua, when you're sincere, when you hold your integrity, when you suffer and sacrifice for His sake, He will bring the king on his knees begging for you to give him some time. Allah will move the whole universe in your favor. So trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and know that Allah will reward the righteous, as Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam says in that very same ayah. Jazakumullah khairan, everybody. We'll end it right here, inshallah, and I will open up the floor for questions. Did we have the Slido up or no? I don't know if they posted it. But anyway, go ahead, brother. Who had their hand? So this is a very good question. So there's some services that they're not the classical standard Islamic authority positions. So we have